Give you one last second to wrap up your conversation. Well, hopefully you met somebody new and you learned something new. My name's Dan. I'm one of the members here, and it's my privilege to get to introduce to you a guest speaker this morning. So 15 years ago in January, we invited a young pastor from a church in Los Angeles to come speak to our young adults community. And I didn't know at the time, but that moment in time would redirect my life and change a lot of people's lives for a variety of reasons. God used this guy in powerful ways to affect our community and the trajectory of my life. I ended up joining the church as a pastor for 8 years, and one of the reasons was because of this guy. And Jason, who's going to speak to us this morning, embodies what it looks like to have a heart to see the entire world transformed through the character of what God has called us to and the values that Jesus came to bring into our world. So there's no better person I would want to introduce this morning to speak to us. No pressure. This morning, we are in good hands this morning with Jason. So Jason, would you come up? Let's give him a warm Brentview welcome. Let me just pray for you as you start. Jesus, thank you so much for Jason, his heart, his mind. Thank you for the character that you have formed in him and you are forming in him. And thank you for the influence that he has become in this place and on this place and around the world. And I just pray that you would bless him as he blesses us. In your name, Jesus, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Dan. Well, it's been a pleasure being here for the last couple of days and getting to know the community. And I've known the community for obviously, like, how long? About 15 years, is that what you said? Wow, when both of us had hair. Yeah. Yeah. So what we're losing in follicles, we're gaining in wisdom. It's maybe, but it's been good to be here. And of course, thank you for allowing us to enjoy your beautiful weather. It's a pleasure to be here. And what I love, by the way, I love Life Sundays. I've never been to one before, but I've heard about them, and it's such a blast to see, especially Jesse for getting baptized. Can we give Jesse another round of applause? Yeah. Oh, man. That's like my favorite. That's like my favorite thing. I spent 10 years being a pastor in Los Angeles, and I just love it when people get dunked. It's just it's the best. John the Dunker. He created a great legacy for us. And Jesse, congratulations. Welcome to the next best season of your life. And one of the things that I love about baptism is not just about declaration, though it is a huge part of the piece of the puzzle, but it's also about desire. Like whenever you declare something, you're also revealing something that you desire. And one of the things that I love about the way that the scriptures represent God is that God actually cares a lot about what you desire. In fact, one of the most popular or most frequent questions that Jesus asked in the scriptures, it might surprise you, the most common question that Jesus asked was, what do you want? What do you want? And I actually want to pause you just for a second. I want you to reflect on that. Like if Jesus were here right now and he were to say to you, hey, what do you want? What do you long for? What do you desire? We could probably create a list. We get everyone's feedback and all these things, and probably there'd be like patterns and trends of things, because human beings, even though there's like unique things that make us specifically us, there's also things that almost every human being wants, no matter where they are, no matter what their socioeconomic status is, no matter what part of the planet they're from, no matter what their families were like. There's these things, these core things that we long for, that God actually not only cares about, but actually gave to us as a mechanism for us to feel fully alive. And so when you're asking this question, like, does God care about what I want? Does God care about me getting what I want? What I want to suggest is not only does God care about what you want, but he's actually given you desire for a reason. So I want to start this morning with one of my favorite verses. Many of you have probably heard this before, and so if you've heard it before, just bear with me for a second. Some of this may be new, but this is so rich. And by the way, there's a lot of young people in the room today. I'm glad you're here this morning. If you can get this when you are young, this will radically change your life. This is so much fun. So the first verse is John 10:10. Go ahead, Colton, in the back. So the first goes like this. If you're wondering why Jesus is up to what he did, if you're wondering why Jesus even came to earth and lived a life and suffered the way that he did, this is why. He said, I came that you may have, what's the word? Life. And then it doesn't just stop there, because raise your hand if you're alive right now. Yeah, congratulations. All right, so it's not just that. Like, it's not, even though we could like look at the depth of what that word life actually means, but I love, he doesn't stop there. He keeps going. He says, a better life than you've ever dreamed of. Now, I want to pause there for a second, because if you're young, my guess is you have dreams, and I want to give away a secret. Like, if you're young and you have like parents, your parents, as weird as they are, they have dreams too. Like, your parents have hopes and dreams and longings just like you do. I know that's kind of weird, but like they have like hopes and dreams for you to leave someday. No, just kidding. I mean, that might be one of their dreams, but but like we have longings and then we have dreams. And what I love about this verse, this is Eugene Peterson's translation of this verse, is he says that God actually has dreams that are so amazing for you, so wonderful for you, so captivating for you, and so magnetic for you that you can't even imagine them. It's like beyond your dreams. So you think right now and write down the dreams that you have for your life, that God, in the imagination of God, there are dreams for your life that you cannot even imagine because it's so far outside what you would ever expect for yourself. And that to me is romantic. That to me is captivating. That to me is something worth dedicating my life to. But then it begs the question, like, how do we get this life? Like, how do I, especially if you've already decided to follow Jesus, if you're like Jesse and you've got dunked and you've had that experience and you've kind of aligned your allegiance to the values of God through the person of Jesus, you're like, now what? Like, now what do I do? Like, how does this process work? And what I love about the scriptures is oftentimes the scriptures are not helpful at all, but sometimes the scriptures are super helpful. So next slide, Colton. So Paul in Philippians says this. He says, therefore, in view of my absence before my presence, he says, continue to work out your salvation. Say the first underline, continue to your salvation. And then the second part, it says, for it is God working through you. So like, this is what I love about it. It's not like God's just going to give you the dream. Like, he's not a fairy godmother, right? He's not going to just like wave a magic wand and then everything just radically changes in your life. He actually invites you into the adventure of your own transformation. He actually gives you something to do. He actually gives you something to work out. And that when you do work out, God then, it opens a door for God to do things that he will not do unless we join him in the adventure. And this phrase, work out, I actually don't like working out, if you can tell. I don't. But I remember when I was in college, I went to Kansas State University. I was studying public relations, and Kansas State University at the time got a brand new gym. And what happens whenever a university gets a brand new state-of-the-art gym is everybody goes, even if you shouldn't go. Like me, right? And I wouldn't, we walked in, it was like the Starship Enterprise. There's windows everywhere, and you had like all like the meatheads and the gym rats and like that kind of thing, and they're working out, and they're like looking in the mirror, and they're feeling good, and then you have like all like the kind of the attractive women on the treadmill with their little hair ponytails dangling like horses running in the wind, And then I wouldn't have the confidence to go like work out with the meatheads and the Bambis. What I usually do is I go find like the corner of the gym with like the stain on the ceiling and the flickering light, and that's where I would like use the machine. Well, not the free weights. Can't do the free weights because I don't have stabilizing muscles. But I would go and I would use like the machines. I would go and use the machines. And so I remember I was going and I would go regularly and I was using the machines. And there was this gentleman kind of across the way, and he's just staring at me. And I already feel self-conscious, but maybe he likes what he sees. I don't know. And so I'm like doing the machines, and you can tell that I haven't been in a while because this is what I think the machines are doing. And he just keeps staring at me. And so finally I like untangle myself from the thing, and I go over and I'm like, "Can I help you?" And he looks at me in a very deep Slavic accent. He goes, "You have a very unique body." And I said, yeah, I know. Like, that's why I'm here, right? Because I knew that I wasn't going to grow unless I went to the gym. And in the same way, oftentimes, as you go through life, I don't know if you feel this way. I feel this way about myself sometimes. Not about my like physical body, but like my spiritual body. Like if a spiritual trainer was looking at me, he might say to my soul, "You have a very unique body." Because I'm not always working out. in the way that I could. And I'm not always working out in a way that's going to produce the kind of character in my life in order for me to accomplish the things that I feel like God is calling me to accomplish. And so this idea of what we contribute, of working out, is so important. And there's a phrase in spiritual history, in Christian history, that has been used over and over and over again to give us tools and dumbbells and barbells and deadlifts for this idea of working out. And Colton, next slide, it's called this. It's called spiritual disciplines. Everyone say spiritual disciplines. So spiritual disciplines are just another phrase, a fancy phrase, or an old phrase of saying working out. So like any kind of spiritual, raise your hand if you've ever heard of spiritual disciplines before. Yeah, you've heard them before. And it's cool. Go to the next slide. We got like a little list here of spiritual disciplines. You got prayer, you got tithing, you got reading scripture, you got fasting, confession, worship, solitude, Jesse, baptism, yeah, right? So here's a list of all of these different spiritual disciplines. And here's what's interesting. I've been able to travel and speak and work with faith communities literally all over the world. And I spent most of my 20s and part of my 30s doing that. And it was so much fun. And we had all these conversations around spiritual disciplines. And whenever I asked people to make a list of spiritual disciplines, this is kind of what it looked like. And maybe if you would have thought about it, you would have had something kind of like this. Maybe you added a few things here. Maybe you would have removed something or whatever. But this is generally the list of things that people think about when they think about spiritual disciplines. And here's what's fascinating, is that almost every list that people make around spiritual disciplines, there's almost always one discipline that's missing. Almost always. When we talk about, oh yeah, we want to sing songs, we want to confess, we want to fast, we want to read the scriptures, we want to pray, tithe, we want to go to church, etc. There's almost always one discipline that's missing. And Colton, next slide, and this is what it is. Everyone say it with me? Risk. Risk. What I want to suggest, if this is the only thing you come away with this morning, I'll consider coming here a great success. Risk is the primary spiritual discipline. In fact, St. Thomas Aquinas said it this way. He said, risk is the chief of all virtues because it's through risk that all virtue flows. And think about this for a second. You don't get to be in the scriptures unless your life is defined by risk. Think about some of the heroes of the scriptures. And again, if you're new, you can kind of follow along. And if you've been here for a while, this will make sense to you. Like Moses. True or false? Moses' life was completely defined by risk. When he goes up to Pharaoh and he says, let my people, that was like the beginning of the adventure. I mean, there are time after time after time. Or Ezra, raise your hand if you know who Ezra is in the scriptures. Yeah, a beauty queen, and the Jewish people are being oppressed by King Xerxes, and she goes up and she challenges him in a way that could have gotten her killed. And she liberates the Jewish people. Like the Apostle Paul, if you read the book of Acts, it reads like an adventure novel, where there's shipwrecks and adventure and people trying to kill, all these things over and over and over and over and over again. People who are connected to the heart of God are putting themselves at risk. And what I want to suggest is one of the greatest tragedies of 20th century Christianity, and as we move into 21st century Christianity, is our movement, sometimes unintentionally, but sometimes away from risk as the core spiritual discipline. And when I was in my early 20s, I got obsessed with this idea. I wrote a book about this idea. I created a company around this idea. This idea of how can we practice becoming a risk taker the same way kids practice playing the piano. How can we make this not just like a glimmer of life, but an actual lifestyle? So much so, I taught a class, a university class on risk. So I used to teach at Pepperdine University in Malibu, California, which is exactly like Calgary. And palm trees, ocean, it's a top 50 school. In fact, this is fun. The way that I got the job was I wanted to be a college professor. I was 27 years old. I had no credentials, but I wanted to be a college professor. So I found out who makes the hiring around Pepperdine University, and I emailed them every day for like months. And then, I wasn't like, creepy or whatever. Like I tried to make it fun and funny and, hey, I know this is like the 378th time that I've emailed you, ha, 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 but kind of a thing. And then finally they were like, hey, if we let you teach here, will you stop emailing us? And I said, absolutely, I would love to do that. And I said, what do you want me to teach? And they said, we don't care. Just stop emailing. This is a true story. Just stop emailing us. So I got to create my own class called Power in the Human Spirit. I taught this class for years. It was one of the highest rated classes at Pepperdine University. I had no business being there. I was 27 years old, no credit. It was so much fun. I lectured in the cemetery. I took the kids to inner city Los Angeles where their lives were put in danger. I would have totally gotten fired if they knew what I was doing. But my favorite part was the assignments. The assignments were where every week you had to take one risk that either made you a better person or the world a better place. And it was so much fun. One of my favorite stories is a guy named Jordan. And his risk was to compose a love song. He played the guitar, kind of. To compose a love song for a girl who didn't know that he existed. And so he went off, and then we all came back to class, and we're all excited. We're like, hey, how did it go? Did she fall in love with you? He smiled, and he goes, nope. She filed a restraining order. It's like, okay, right? So then, but sometimes there was another young woman in the class, and her name was Lauren. And Lauren she was awesome. She was like this. Some of you are like this, and some of you know people who are like this. She was a powerful leader, but she was quiet. Like, so you could tell, you could just feel her strength and her dignity, her poise, her grace. But it was never flashy. It was never like out loud or anything like that. It was a very powerful woman, and her risk was to go to her coach at Pepperdine University and tell her coach that her dream was to be an Olympic trainer someday. Now, you may be thinking, like, that's not a big deal. And in some ways, it's not a big deal. Like, it's just a conversation. However, quick show of hands, how many of you have ever, like, wanted to share your dream with somebody? Or how many of you would feel uncomfortable, maybe, sharing, like, your deep, deep, deep desired dream to somebody else? I mean, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it can be a little uncomfortable, right? So she goes, and by the way, coaches, athletic coaches, Dan and I work together in an executive coaching firm. Dan heads up our athletic department, all of our work with athletes and coaches and everything. It's amazing. And, like, coaches and athletes, they're not like the warmest people. They're not like the cuddliest people. It's not the people you go to like necessarily be affirmed all the time, kind of deal. So Lauren goes to this guy's office, and she's terrified. She goes in, and I don't know if you've ever like been in a conversation, there's a thing that you want to talk about, so you wait till the very end to bring it up. So he's like, she's wasting all this time. Hey, how's your family? How's your kid? This kind of thing. Ha, ha, ha. Yeah. And so finally the coach is like, hey, why are you here? And she spits it out like a confession, right? Like, I want to be an Olympic trainer someday. And then because this coach is kind and warm and gentle, he says, that's impossible. And her little dream bubble was like, and then he makes it worse. He's like, it's impossible. You'd have to you can't just do that. Like, you have to know people. You have to have connections. That's really hard to do. I just, without those types of connections, I don't really see that happening. And just with each sentence, like, her head just hangs lower and lower and lower, and she's embarrassed and ashamed, and she hangs her head. And then she hears the strangest thing. She hears the phone, the click of the phone. This is in the 90s. Click of the phone. And she hears her coach make a phone call. And then in that meeting, she hears the coach say, hey, Karen, yeah, hey, how's Colorado? Yeah, very good. Hey, I've got a girl here who should do your internship program. She'd make a fantastic coach, an Olympic coach, and because that's where the Olympic headquarters is at the time, was in Colorado Springs. And after that phone call, she went and she did an internship in Colorado Springs, and then she's on her way. Now she's an Olympic coach in the U.S. Olympics. Now, here's the question I want to ask you. What would your life be like if you just took a little more risk? No matter how young you are, no matter how old you are, what would be happening in your life, in your relationships, in your finances, in your career, in the impact that you have in the world? What would your life look like if you just took a little bit more risk? And I want to double click on this just for a few minutes, and then I'll wrap up and I'll be done. So we're not talking about just like any kind of risk. We're talking about a specific kind of risk. How many of you have ever seen people take risks and they're, they're morons? Right? You ever see that before? Like, there are some risks that aren't worth taking, even if you're successful. Can we agree on that? Like, maybe composing a love song to a woman who doesn't know that you exist. Like, maybe that's not necessarily the best thing. So what I want to do is I want to throw up, Colton, next slide. I want to throw up a very specific kind of risk called asymmetrical risk. Everyone say this together? Asymmetrical risk. Yeah, so asymmetrical risk, there's two types. Colton, next slide. The first type is even if you win, you lose, right? And so as an example, this is kind of a serious example, but there was a guy I was talking to who became a client in our firm, and he's a senior partner at one of the most successful investment firms in the history of humanity. And so by most outside metrics, he's winning. Family, wife, kids, all the thing, multiple homes all over the US, and he was really feeling stuck. He was really feeling kind of miserable, actually. And he said, hey, Jason, I have a confession to make. I said, what's that? He goes, well, I was talking to my son. And I said, hey, son, I love my family, I love my wife, and all that kind of stuff. He's like, but when it comes to your career, he's talking to his son now, he's like 6 years old. When it comes to your career, do not do what I did. He took jobs that he hated just to make money. So even though he was winning, he was totally losing. And the scriptures talk about this. Next slide. The scriptures talk about this. Jesus said this. Here we go. Next slide, Colton. Sorry, buddy. What profits a man if he gains the whole world yet loses his soul? So there's actually some games that you can dedicate your life to, and even if you win, you lose. I mean, you know what I'm talking about, right? So then there's the flip side, though. And this is where I want to spend the remainder of a few minutes here. The flip side, next slide, Colton. The flip side is even if you lose, you win. Even if you lose, you win. These are the best kind of risks. There are some risks that aren't worth taking even if you're successful. Then there's other risks that are only worth taking if you're successful. And then there are some risks that are worth taking whether you are successful or not. And these are I like to call them sacred risks. These are holy risks. These are the kind of risks that God loves, like Santa on Christmas morning. These are the kind of gifts that God loves inviting us into. I want to give you one last example, and then I'll be done. So go ahead, and actually, no, there we go. Oh, this is great. So Paul talks about this. This actually, I think, is so powerful. Paul wrote the book of Philippians when he was in prison, and he said, "For me to live is Christ and to die is gain." This is asymmetrical risk. He's saying, hey, Romans, if you want, you can execute me, or you can let me live. Either way, it works for me. Paul has designed the game for asymmetrical risk. By the way, I know this is a little controversial, but one of my favorite asymmetrical risks is running for public office. Now, I know in America that's kind of crazy right now, and even if you lose, you win. And this is why, and people who are successful over and over and over and over again understand this. People who struggle to be successful never learn this. It's people who are successful in life, whether it's in relationships or finances or impact or whatever, they design their lives to where even if they lose at whatever they're going after, they still win. And I'll give you one example around this. So a couple years ago, I met a woman, and I fell in love, and I wanted to marry her. So I was in Nashville, Tennessee, and I didn't live there, but I was and I was talking about proposing, and quick show of hands of people who had proposed before. Yeah, it's terrifying, by the way. It's exciting, but also terrifying. If you talk to men, like, what were you thinking before you got down on the knee and opened the ring? Like, I don't remember. It was like a buzzing of some kind. I'm not quite sure. And so I really, this woman is amazing. She's intelligent. She's smart. She's awesome. I really wanted this to be a great moment. And I was talking to some friends and getting some advice. And what my friend said, hey, Jason, no matter what you do, give her a story to tell, because she's going to be telling this story for the rest of her life. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to swing for the fences. All right. And so this is what I decided to do. I was like, okay, what does swinging for the fences look like? So this was the plan. So my girlfriend, Mina, she was in Washington, D.C. She was living in New York, but she's in Washington, D.C. I was in L.A. And what I was going to do is she's going to come from D.C. to New York. I was going to, when she got to New York, her friends were going to take her out on a yacht. And then they were going to go, when they were passing the Statue of Liberty, they were going to go down below, and then I was going to come up as a surprise because she thought I was in LA, and I was going to propose. Then we're going to go past the Statue of Liberty. We're going to go off the coast of Coney Island, and that night there were fireworks planned. So we got the yacht, we got the friends, we got the Statue of Liberty, I flew in a professional photographer, and we're going to have the fireworks. That was the plan. And so she was going to have this amazing experience, amazing fireworks. Her friends were going to be there. We're going to call people on the way. It's going to be amazing on this beautiful boat, beautiful weather, all this kind of stuff. That was the plan. So I'm flying from LA. I take the red eye. My nephew graduates high school in LA. So then I take the red eye to New York. As we're landing in New York City, the pilot comes on and says, hey, as we approach New York, you're going to notice it's a little foggy. Don't worry about it. It's just, it's going to be fine, which I thought was weird. We land in New York City. I land in New York City, and I start kind of scouting the location, make sure that the boat's okay, make sure everything's going well, and it is smoky. It is like very smoky in New York City. I'm like, okay, that's fine, that's no problem. And about 10 o'clock in the morning, I get a phone call, and I got a notification saying that the Coney Island fireworks have been canceled. And I'm like, because of the smoke. I'm like, okay, all right, that's no problem. So I can still, the yacht's still good, right? The friends are still there. New York's still there. That's no problem, right? Then a couple hours later, I get a text from Mina's friends saying, hey, Mina's telling me that her flight has been canceled because of all the smoke. Okay, all right. Because so she's in D.C., and they say, but don't worry about it. She's going to take the Amtrak. She'll be here. She's just going to get here a couple hours later. So I'm like, hey, no problem. so then I call the captain of the ship, and I say, hey, can we move the time back for the boat? And he says, well, I have good news and bad news. I say, well, what's the good news? The good news is we can push the time back. I said, what's the bad news? He's like, well, time back is going to have to be like weeks from now because it's so smoky that no one's going out. Like, it's a health hazard to go outside. So it's a couple hours before I'm supposed to propose, and I've got no fireworks, no boat, and no Mina. And I'm like, okay. And so then some of you are with me on this. Some of you are like, okay, well, just, postpone the thing. But here's the deal. How many of you guys have been planning a proposal or some kind of surprise for your spouse, and she knows you're lying to her, and it causes conflict in the relationship? I actually told Mina, I said, hey, for the next couple months, your intuition is going to tell you I am lying to you. And I had like a whole fake story about me speaking at this conference in Miami. I had a fake flyer made, so she thought I was going to be in Miami when I was really in LA, and I was flying to all this kind of stuff. And we were fighting a lot because she did not follow my advice. And I was like, I could postpone this a couple months, but I don't know if our relationship's going to survive that. So I have to do this tonight. So I'm like, okay, what can I do? So Mina has this amazing place in New York City. It's got floor-to-ceiling windows to view the water. Like, okay, I can do something there. And then I'm like, okay, so I can get rose petals. I can get rose petals, and I can propose, and it's okay. Bear with me. This is about to get awesome. So I'm in my pajamas because I took a red eye, and I've got my luggage. They wouldn't let me into the hotel because I didn't check in the night before. And so I've got my luggage, I'm in my pajamas, and I go to rose store number 1, and I say, well, do you have roses? Yeah, we got 100 long-stem roses. Okay, I'll take all of those. But that's not going to be enough for what I got in my mind. So then I go to rose petal store number 2. I'm carrying the 100 rose petals from the first thing, and I say, what do you got for me? They say, we've got 5 boxes of rose petals. I'll take all of those. So I buy all those. So now I've got the rose petals, and I got the long stem roses. I'm in my pajamas. I got my luggage. I need candles. So then I go to Target in Brooklyn, which is another word for hell. And I'm wandering through Target like some kind of bizarro flower-loving homeless person. And no kidding, while I'm carrying this through, I've got only a couple hours to pull this off, and I'm looking for the candles, and the bag holding the rose petals rips. And flowers go everywhere. And I sit down on the floor of Target, and I'm like, I quit. And I sit there in the petals, and I quit. And then I remember, I'm an executive coach. I can't quit. I coach people not to quit. What kind of hypocrite would I be? So I gathered everything up. I bought some candles. I get to Mina's place, and the photographer meets me there. I've never met her before. It's this beautiful woman. I flew her in from LA. And we go up to Mina's place, and we're setting some things up. And as we're setting things up, I realized that this is not what I wanted for her. We're putting things around. And in my mind, I don't know if you ever imagined, Bono said one time that every time he writes a song, it's a sacrifice because it's never as good as it is in his own head. And I had this image in my mind of Scrooge McDuck's money bin, just covered in roses. And it's 5 boxes. It's like a pile. And I'm like, this is not good. This is not what I wanted. I'm like, you know what? I can't do this. She deserves a better story than this. I'm like, and I say to the photographer, I'm like, hey, let's just pack up, and I'll live to fight another. I'll risk the lying for another couple months to give Mina what I feel like she deserves. And right as we're having that conversation, we both hear the door unlock, and in walks Mina, and she took an earlier train. She didn't tell me because she thought I was in Miami. And so you got to imagine this. My girlfriend walks in to her apartment where I am there with another woman with roses everywhere. The photographer dives under the table. And for the safety of her own life, she says, I'm the photographer. And at that moment, I burst into tears. Because I'm like, this is the worst possible thing that could have ever happened. Mina walks in, she's so confused. Here's this guy in his pajamas. Why is he crying? Why is there a woman under the table saying that she's a photographer? She puts it together, and I look at her and I say, we can do this now, or I can pack up and you can forget this ever happened. And she walks up to me, and I don't know what she's going to say. She walks up to me, she smiles, and then, Colton, the next slide. She wraps her arms around me, and so then I take her into the middle of the room with a pile of roses, and I propose, and she says yes. Now here's the deal. All day, I was losing. I was losing like you can't even lose. I was losing like if you wrote a movie, it wouldn't be this bad of how bad I was losing. Although even though I was losing all day, at the end of the day, next slide, I totally won. Now this is why this matters. Like I know this is just about a proposal, like who cares? But here's what I want to suggest to you. I want to suggest to you right now that there are risks. There are swing for the fences. There are hopes and dreams and desires that God has for you, that God has for Brentview, that will never be unlocked, that will never be tapped into, that will never be unleashed unless you collectively take a risk. Now, I don't know what risks you're thinking about right now. I don't know what risks you're desiring to take. But what I want to suggest to you is that for the last 2,000 years, the people of God have been defined by risk. And what I want to suggest to you, even though I know there's some financial challenges right now, but I want to tell you right now, Brentview's best days are ahead of her. That there are miracles and opportunities and adventures and 1,000 stories of people like Jesse saying, I want my life to be defined by the values and the adventure of the risks of God. And I'm done here, and we're going to sing one last song. We're going to sing Amazing Grace. And one of my favorite definitions of grace is by a guy named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a German theologian and pastor, and he was actually executed by the Nazis for a failed assassination attempt against Adolf Hitler. He lived an incredible life. He wrote multiple books. He's impacted millions of people across the world through his life and his sacrifice. And he said this in The Cost of Discipleship, one of my favorite books. He said, grace is the opportunity to become like Christ. Grace is the opportunity to become compassionate. Grace is the opportunity to become wise. Grace is the opportunity to become courageous. Grace is the opportunity to live a life that is so beautiful that it would be beyond our wildest dreams. That's what I want for you. That's what I want for us. That's what I want for Brentview. That's what God wants for us. So may we together take risks. May we take risks that are worth taking, whether they work or not. And may we marvel as God steps into it and works out our salvation together with fear and trembling. Thanks, everybody.